David Seymour, thank you for joining us on This Is the Effin' News, or it's not really us, it's just me, but thank you for joining me on This Is the Effin' News. James Cameron, the Avatar director, says that there are people out there that don't understand the taxpayer subsidies for film and that they're more of an investment. You've been one of the most foremost critics of these subsidies. Is there something about them that you don't understand?
Well, not that I'm aware of. If he wants to tell me what I don't understand, I'm happy to hear it. But there's two things I know about this. Number one is that he's right about something. Every other country gives these subsidies, and if New Zealand doesn't, we lose the industry. And on balance, we're probably getting more back from having it than if we didn't. So he's half right. But I just make one point about that. The thing about movie stars and filmmakers is that they're kind of cool and, often good looking and charismatic on average. Then there are politicians who on average are not usually those things. And in every country, there's politicians who think if they give a subsidy to the film industry, they might get to be on the red carpet and meet an actor or an actress or something. And it's kind of just a bit cringe because there's no other industry. I mean, you don't see this for, the bulldozer industry, every government giving a subsidy to that so they can have a bulldozer industry. The only reason that this industry is different is that politicians swoon over them, and I just find that a bit cringy. Now, even James Shaw used to say this. He basically agrees with me. Yep, we've got to do it because every other government does it, but it would be better if we didn't. The second point I'd make is that there's a difference between servicing an industry and having an industry. And when I talk to people in the New Zealand film industry, they say things like, yeah, okay, so a couple of $100 million a year, make it $3 billion of tax breaks in the last 20 years. And where is the New Zealand actors, actresses, producers, directors, the people that have actually made it to the top globally who are now at American studio level? And the truth is that for the most part, what we've done is been the grips and the carpenters building the sets. Sure, we're a workshop, pretty impressive. The people that have really made it, like our friend Mr. Waititi, who's a real hero for the New Zealand film industry, he made it on his own talent, nothing to do with these government subsidies. So I'd just make the point that, yep, so we're kind of in a bind because other countries do it. It'd be better if we didn't. And meanwhile, yeah, we've served his interests well and we've been a good service industry for his films, but where is the New Zealand film industry that's been built that's actually going up the value chain and putting Kiwis front and centre? It's not happening.
So do you support subsidising Avatar or not?
Well, the government's policy, and remember I'm part of a government that has a policy of putting out these subsidies, and we do that because we want to be competitive with other countries who have also been swooned. Their politicians have also been swooned, and we recognise if we didn't do it, we'd lose them. And that's why the government's policy is to keep supporting it. And of course, I support the government's policy. Paul Goldsmith's our minister, and I support his decisions. But I also just make the point that if you want to get into a real debate about is this a good policy and is it in our best interest, maybe it's a bit difficult for James Cameron to understand when he's getting hundreds of millions of taxpayer cash. I can understand that could cloud his thinking. Actually, I think I understand it pretty well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so you do understand it. You do understand the policy. You don't like it as a person, as a human being, do you?
Well, as a politician, I think it would be better if countries got together and said, you know what, these guys are playing us off each other. They're all taking us for a ride. They are charismatic rent seekers, and would be better as governments around the world to unite against them and say, you know what, guys, you're just like any other business at the end of the day. You're not actually special. If you want to invite us to the red carpet, you can, but you get the same tax treatment as everybody else. That would be the best thing to happen.
But it's cringy, in your words.
Yep.
It's swooning over Hollywood, in your words.
Yep.
He is a charismatic rent seeker. James Cameron is a charismatic rent seeker,
well,
in your words.
You've interviewed me and you've interviewed him. I'm sure he was more charismatic.
But no, about even. About even.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
You're very kind.
Yeah. But still, you are going to go along. We are going to keep paying him because we want to have Avatar here because we can't dent what the rest of the world is doing.
Yeah, and I just make the point that that's the position every government's been put in. I don't like it. I don't think it's the right way. I think there's a better way to do it. But that's where we are. So I'm open about that. I mean, there's lots of things about the world and about the policies we have that I don't like. I still think we should be able to raise the debate. And the other thing I'd say is if we're going to keep giving a couple of $100 million a year, let's start putting some conditions in. If you want to go from the 20% to the 25% tax break, maybe for one thing, you should actually have to be using New Zealand talent so that we can actually say, look, there's a world-class producer or director or actor or whatever who started in New Zealand, and because we're building our own industry, we've actually got some higher productivity, because otherwise all the Americans fly in, they do all the high productivity stuff, and all the New Zealanders do the lower productivity stuff. Now, if you want to know why New Zealand has a wage and productivity problem, it's because we've given out all the government cash, but we haven't demanded the results.
Okay, this is interesting because it's got about $144 million in taxpayer subsidies, at least, probably more. Those are some outdated figures. I'm trying to get an update. $144 million, that's going to keep going and going and going. It's got 5 or 6 years to go. You are saying to me today that you would like to see some conditions put on James Cameron to use New Zealand producers, directors and actors in the Avatar movies, given that huge sum of money that he's getting.
Well, look, this is up to Paul Goldsmith. He's the Minister of Arts, Culture and Heritage. I'm just here because I think the debate is interesting and we should have these discussions. But ultimately, I support where Paul goes. I just make the point that if what we've really done is given a massive taxpayer subsidy to an industry that has employed a lot of New Zealanders. They've employed a lot of carpenters building sets, but what that means is we've sucked those workers out of building homes, out of building infrastructure. We've basically transferred those resources from doing things that I would say New Zealand needs more of into making movies that are directed by Americans, and I'm not sure that's ultimately the best policy for us.
So will you raise that with Paul Goldsmith, that you would like to see some conditions put on James Cameron and on Avatar to use New Zealand actors, directors, producers?
Well, it's fair to say that we have ongoing discussions. I think part of the issue with this one is the agreement's already inked, and one thing I won't do is go back on a deal. But if we want to start having the discussion about how do we decringe this, and how do we, if we can't decringe it and we got to keep giving the subsidies, how do we get some value for New Zealanders, then I think that's a discussion we need to have.
Yeah, so just finally, conditions. The ACT Party would like to see conditions put on producers like James Cameron to take on New Zealand staff, develop our actors, our directors, our producers, and not just be, I think, sort of in the more servant side of things.
Well, I didn't say that, and I don't want to take away from the people that work in the industry. I just think they've got
service.
Service.
That's my fault.
We're servicing an industry rather than building an industry, and I just think a lot of those Kiwis that have gone along and worked on these films, they should actually have an opportunity to go up.
So your message to James Cameron is employ some Kiwis, take them to the top.
Exactly. Yep, take them seriously.
That's what you would say to James Cameron. So what would you say to James Cameron if he was sitting where I am right now?
Oh, I'd just say, look, I hope you're grateful for the subsidies. I hope that your films are a bit less socialist in the future. And also, there's a lot of real talented Kiwis. I mean, you look at Taika Waititi, but he didn't make it to the top because of our film program. He made it to the top because he's bloody good. There might be a few more Taika Waititis out there you can find.
And he should employ them.
Absolutely, and he should back them, and it should be a condition of wanting to do business here. If you really love this country and you're so passionate and you're such a nice guy, back some Kiwis and take them all the way to the top.
David Seymour, leader of the ACT Party and incoming Deputy Prime Minister, thank you very much for joining me on This Is the Fucking News.
Thank you.